Yeah, I think it could, but I don't know about the sound. Let me see. Okay, testing the sound. I cannot hear it in the YouTube. Okay. There, I think it's too low and it's delayed, obviously, but let's see. I'll try to speak a bit louder. Okay. So let me know when we start. Uh, okay, sure. All right. Hello everyone. I am Pratham from AMP, and today we are going to have a webinar and a good discussion on campus placement interviews and how to ace them. So here's the agenda for today. First I'm going to talk about what is AMP, who we are, and then we'll introduce the panel, and then we'll have some discussions, and then finally we'll have a strategy that the finalist students can follow, and then we have some pointers, and then we'll open for the questions. Right. So, what is Alumni Mentorship Program? Alumni Mentorship Program is basically a volunteer-based group of people who are here to help students grow, not only in terms of their technical skills, but also soft skills, which are useful for them in the long-term growth in their career as well as human beings. So, we basically provide a infrastructure wherein a student can connect to a mentor of his choice, and then they can have a discussion on how to shape his careers and how to basically best utilize his college time and other things, right? And then we also organize interactive events, and this event is one of them, right? So moving on next, so students will have a lot of benefits. First of all, they are connecting to someone with industrial experience, so basically they'll have more clearer path on what their life is going to look like in the longer run, right? Student can also discuss their life goals and plans with a mentor who has traveled the same journey as they would be in the future, right? And then they can also introspect and discover their own strengths and weakness. Mentors will help them in this, and most importantly, they'll mentors will help them select a career path, because usually students they are quite diverted, and mentors can help them streamline their career, right? And not only the skills but also uh, not only the technical skills but also the life skills that they need in their life, right? So as I mentioned, AMP is a volunteer based organization. We are always open for new volunteers, so if you guys feel free, if you guys feel like volunteering or helping us out, please reach out to any of the email IDs mentioned here. And for the juniors and sophomores, we can obviously provide certificates for their contribution to the group, right? So moving on next, the panel. So I'll start off with myself. I currently work at Cisco as a software developer, and I currently work in 5G IoT team of Cisco. My areas of interest are cloud computing, cybersecurity, and Internet of Foods. Okay. So next we have Kinshuk Sharma. So why don't you introduce yourself in a couple of lines, Kinshuk? Over to you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to start with wishing all of you all the very best for the upcoming placement sessions. I graduated in electrical engineering in 2013, and for the past 5 years, I've been working on the graphics IP in Apple at Austin, Texas. My most recent work has gone into the M1 Core M1, which basically features in the M1 Max and M1 Pro SoCs from Apple.
All right. Moving on next, we have Vikas Shingal. So please introduce yourself.
Hi guys, first of all, best wishes for the upcoming placement session and for the festive season, which is currently going on, which got over yesterday itself. I work with Yes Bank currently as an investment counselor. My core interests are into wealth management, financial planning, investment planning for ultra HNI clients. Prior to that, I have worked with some startups as well. I have around 10 years of experience across industries. Thank you.
All right. Moving on. Next, we have Abhay Agrawal. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. This is Abhay. I'm a civil engineer and I did masters also, and started my life with railways. Now I am with Ernst& Young for 15 years, leading infrastructure practice. Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the most important part of this webinar. So, how it's going to be like? I'll be asking a couple of questions to all the panelists, and we'll be learning from their experiences and see what they have to offer. All right. So, here's the first question for Kinshuk. So, can you please talk about pre-interview homework? So, how can a student basically prepare before actually appearing for an interview? So, over to you.
All right. Yeah. Firstly, I'd like to put some context to it because right now we're already in the first week of November and
Right.
the final interviews are just about 3 weeks away, right? So I would say the most important thing to do in the next 3 weeks would be to reach out to seniors and figure out uh, the pattern of the interview for the target companies that you are targeting, right? Because the way it works in campus interviews is that every company has a set pattern of things that they want to ask or a set pattern of skill sets that they want to check, and that usually doesn't change year to year too much. So it will help you greatly if you are able to reach out to seniors or if you are able to reach out to other people and figure out what are the skill sets that are being looked at, and that way you can cater your interview experience accordingly. Also, I was this was not available during my time, but I've been made aware that Rootki has a resource online where you can go and basically scroll through all the questions, all the types of puzzles, and other things being asked in the previous years of interviews. So that would be a great help too. So please use that resource to the maximum. Take time to read through it. Take time to understand what is being asked. If there are certain puzzles, practice puzzle solving, etc. Another important thing that I think should be laid stress on is identifying your weak skill. And every one of us has some weak skill, right? For example, some people feel really nervous when they are put in a pressure situation. So a good thing to do would be in the next 3 weeks, try to do mock interviews, try to put yourself in those situations, imagine those situations in your head, and try to speak as freely as possible. Some people find it like difficult to communicate freely or communicate in a brief manner. So if you think that's your weak skill, go ahead and practice that. So those kind of things will really help because you will be in the rhythm to give interviews right when the interview time arrives. And then the final thing is, which again did not exist in my time, but these days, because of the number of companies approaching IIT Roorkee, people are asked to fill out a preference sheet, right? Where you are asked to say that if you get selected for multiple companies, what would be your preference? And with most of you, that would be a likely scenario where you would actually make it to 2 or 3 companies, and your final job would be decided on a preference sheet uh, that you filled out prior to your interviews. So then it's extremely important that you do a lot of research before filling that preference sheet, right? Make sure you understand what you want to work on and make sure to make it your top priority. So those are the things that I think would really help you guys.
All right, great point. So you mentioned about mock interviews. We'll come to it in detail later. So next, we have one question for Vikash. So what do you think is the best approach to design initial introduction? Or maybe how do a student approach, I mean, reply to the questions asked by the interview, right?
Uh,
So, yep.
Yeah, Pratham. So basically, it is the first question which most of the interviewer asks, right? Tell me about yourself, and our response to this question actually defines the complete flow of the interview, because our responses will ensure that what will the next question coming from the interview's end. So whenever we are replying to these questions, we need to ensure that we are not going on into those details which are actually not required in that particular job profile. Better we go into those responses which actually define the skills required for the that particular job, and also your strengths, where you can where if interviewer asks any question, you can always have good responses to them. So basically, you can define the flow of your interview by while answering your introductory response. Like there are some specific points which I would like to mention here. Like it is a camp. Most you guys will be applying for campus interview. You most of you are all of you are fresher basically. So we obviously mention about our grades in our 10th or 12th standards and the graduation. So uh, mention only grades if you have not achieved some extraordinary marks in your that particular exam. So if you have achieved say 99% marks or 98% very high marks in your 10th or 12th, specifically mention about that. Otherwise just mention your grade, that will obviously help, right? Sometimes what happens, some of the candidates comes and they say that I scored 70 marks, 70% marks. Now it is an average, right? It's better you mention that I got first grade. So please avoid those kind of things. And please focus on your strengths while mentioning about your projects which you have done during your college time, which will define the flow of the interview.
Uh, all right. So I've got another point to add here. So for the students, you might know that. Okay, so you all must be appearing for the interviews from your college, right? So I would say there's no need for mentioning your college name when you try to give your introduction, right? So these kind of small things that you can save your time on, and instead you can focus more on your skills, right? So this could be one thing. Okay, so moving on next, we have another question for Abhay. What is the interviewer and interviewee's mindset in general? So, what actually these guys are expecting? So, from your experience, can you tell us something?
Yeah, thank you, Pratham. So I almost interview 30 to 40 people every month.
Oh, that's
Uh, and So our, of course, in Big Four, our approach is to, just not take people who are very smart in answering. We see attitude, we see alertness, we see modesty, we see presence of mind, hearing, learning ability, and so all of this. So it is very important that you are first of all very attentive, alert, and mindfully present there, so that you can listen properly the question. And if you are not heard anything, please ask politely again, or you can rephrase the question to just get it clarified. Don't do it too often, rephrasing that doesn't look good. So better that you hear it first. Be genuine in your skin, in your body, comfortable. Don't try to ape somebody who you think is very smart or makes good answers, etc. Just be yourself. Mostly technical questions, etc. Though in campus it is more, but I will believe that it is not the main thing. They will try to test your comfort in technical, in terms of going little deeper, asking one or two questions. So uh, just be attentive, be very positive attitude. So um, if I want to define positive attitude, is something where you have a fixed mindset or growth mindset. Fixed mindset is where you think what you have done only in the past, and a growth mindset is always looking towards future. Many of the people, they talk about grand future, that I will do this after 3 years, after 5 years I will do this. I think you have to identify with the firm, and genuinely, don't fake it, and grow with the firm. And that's what everybody likes who comes here. It doesn't want to hear your plan of jumping around. He wants to you to grow with the firm, and he wants firm to grow with you. And there are a lot of data, people who jumped around 20 years, where they reached, and people who are kind of at one place, how did they do in life, and they did much better. Yeah, Pratham. So these are the initial.
all right. Yeah. Thanks. So yeah, one thing I would like to add here is, so there's something called imposter syndrome, and I think every student who is appearing for the interviews must watch it. So I'll talk about it later in the strategy section, but let's move on for now. So we have another question. I think it's very important. It's for the Kinshuk. So what do you think are the red flags in the interview? What things should students avoid? Over to you.
Great question. Yeah. I'll give you some context here. Since I've only worked for 5 years for Apple, most of the interview experience that I have interviewing candidates has been interviewing college grads or people who have worked for 1 or 2 years, right? So based on those experiences, I've come up with 4 points which are absolute red flags for me when I interview someone, and in that order of priority. So the first thing that's a very big red flag for me is when an interviewee gives up trying to answer a question. Most of the time we are asking questions which to which the interview doesn't have a direct answer to. It may be a technical question or it may not be a technical question. I may ask about a real life situation, but mostly it's a technical question, right? And most candidates actually do not know the answer straight away. But what I like to see in them is them giving a good effort to actually come to an answer. And when they do that, I actually help them in the process. So what it also helps me establish is whether they are able to understand hints, whether they are able to understand fundamental concepts and derive complex answers out of them. So never give up in an interview. It can be a puzzle, it can be a technical question, it can be anything else. Keep trying unless the interviewer themselves decide to move on because they have other things to get to. But keep trying and keep making a genuine effort to come to the right answer. Another very big red flag is being dishonest or overselling in your resume. Now, you should not write a bland resume where you just state the facts as it. You should always embellish them a little bit, right? But a dishonesty is a very big flag for any interviewer. So I believe now you guys have already submitted your resume, right? So make sure that whatever you've written there, you are able to back it up with real data, real life examples, with the kind of things that you have done, and make sure you can speak for every single word in your resume. And in future, always make it a point that writing less in a resume is good, but as long as you can back up everything that you have written in your resume. So that I think is absolutely important. Never come to a scenario where you're not able to back up what you wrote in your resume. Another big red flag is being a bad listener. So often I see interviewers who are a little bit nervous, and in their nervousness, they try to basically jump to the right answers because they're very eager to answer the question correctly. And what happens is they actually miss the point. They actually miss the thing that I'm trying to ask to them. So always be a very patient listener. Let the person finish their question first. If you want more data, it's always good to ask counter questions. So let's say I ask you a technical question, you can ask me, okay, did you make these assumptions while you frame this question? And I'll be happy to answer that yes, I made these assumptions or I did not make these assumptions, right? So patiently listen, ask counter question, and then give the absolute perfect answer. The last thing that I would say is lack of confidence in your answers. It can be technical or non-technical. So for example, let's say I ask you a technical question and let's say you come up with the right answer straight away. And I try to test your confidence in your answer. So I ask you a counter question, or I try to confuse you, or I ask you a question which is tangential to what I just asked. And let's say you lose your confidence there and you are flaky. Then it makes me believe that, okay, you knew this answer by chance, or maybe you knew this question and now you just like blurted out the answer. It shouldn't be like that. The answer should come out from a fundamental understanding, right? So make sure you're confident even in your real life examples. Let's say you did something and in your behavioral interview you say that you did these things and you learned these things out of your activity. If a person counter questions you and if you lose your confidence, then they will not genuinely believe in what you just said. So make sure you have these 4 points in your mind when you're interviewing. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, these were great points. So now that we have talked about red flags, right? So next question would be, how do we recover from a mistake that we have made, right? What would be the best way so that we can recover from any mistake that we have made? And I would have this question for Vikash.
Yeah, thanks, Pratham, for this question. And I have seen a lot of candidates lose confidence if they answer, wrongly. One or two questions, if they have answered wrongly, and they lose confidence, and they think that this particular job is gone for me, and they feel that yeah, everything is over now. So it should not be the case, because the interviewer also knows that it is your first time where you are giving the interviews, and you are fresher, you don't have that experience of giving multiple interviews over a period of time. They understand that you might be nervous as well, you would have made a mistake, because interviewer himself has gone through that phase some point in time. So they understand that thing. They want to understand whether you have that confidence of bouncing back and ensuring that your interview is going as per their requirement. They actually wants to know whether you have those ability to learn, and are you ready to adapt to the environment. So if made a mistake and you feel that you have actually made a particular mistake in answering a question, while while interview is getting over, while you are saying thank you, you can just mention always that I realized that I answered this question wrongly, and I believe this should be the answer. Sorry, I am confident that this is the right answer, and you can give. And if you don't have any answer and you know that you have given wrong answer, please move on. Get your confidence back, and bounce back with the right answers for the upcoming questions. So basically, your one or two answers will not have those great impact on your overall interview. You must ensure that the interview shall continue in the flow which it was going, and you are able to put forward your strengths in front of the interviewer. Yeah, yeah, Pratham.
All right. So, yeah, here we have another question. So, it's regarding the interview preparations, right? So, the question is, how can students learn from their own mistakes when it comes to interview preparation, right? So, I have this question for Abhay.
Yeah, it's a tricky question, but I think if you are aware what mistakes you have done, I think that is the first positive step, because you have self-awareness and self-presence. What you can also do is to ask your colleagues or your friends, etc., that in similar situation what will be their answer, and how should you handle in future some of these questions. So I think best thing is what we say is, when in doubt, consult. And because I'm a consultant, so I will also advise that when you are in doubt, you want to recover from your own follies. I think have few friends, good friends whom you trust, and just discuss with them. Find out what I mean. If you That is the, I think, the whole strength of brainstorming, is that you hear many views, and everybody has a different narrative, different perspective. And once they answer, then you will be able to relate to it, them, that what is best for you.
All right. Now, since you talked about brainstorming, right, we have another question that's related to searching out on Google about the company. So here's the question. Why do you want to join my company? This is a very important question, and I'll request Kinshuk to answer this question.
All right, thank you. Um, yes, as Pratham said, it's a very important question because I believe 80 to 90% companies will ask this question, and they will ask it to all candidates. And most candidates will have a common answer to this, right? Or a template answer to this. So the first thing to avoid is a template answer. So, and even in the context of off-campus interviews, it applies because in off-campus interviews, you are asked to write something which is called a cover letter, which is an equivalent to answering the question, why do you want to join our company? Now, just assume a scenario where I come to your campus and I interview 10 different candidates, and 9 candidates give me a similar answer versus one person actually does a research on what Apple does and comes and tell me that, hey, I researched what Apple does and I'm really excited about the latest Apple silicon that was out, and I believe that these technical like these technical specifications are out of the charts, they have good benchmark results, etc., etc., then it gives me a lot of confidence in that candidate, that that candidate really wants to join Apple and has done a lot of research behind it. And that thing is very easy to do. So sometimes people think that, okay, if I want to interview for 10 companies, how do I do this much research for 10 companies? But it's actually not like that. Even to research for 1 or 2 companies, it hardly takes half an hour. So I would say, just like before your interview days, just dedicate 1 day to just researching about companies. If you have 50 companies coming to IIT Roorkee that are target companies, divide them into separate sections. Some companies belong to FMCG categories, some companies are tech industry, so it can be hardware tech, software tech. Some companies are related to consulting, some companies are in the banking space. Make different zones of different companies, then write out an answer for them, and then add specific details. Don't do don't do they have don't get into the habit of writing a cover letter and then doing a search and replace of one company's name with the other company's name, because as an interviewer, it is very easy to make that out. If you give me a template answer, it's very easy for me to recognize that it's a template answer. I'll give you a very good anecdote for this as well. In 2013, when we were interviewing, ITC and Rio Tinto, they were both day one companies, and my friend was interviewing for both of them, and both of them were interviewing in parallel. And this guy was really excited to join ITC. So he made it to the final round of both companies, and Rio Tinto guys asked him that, why do you want to join Rio Tinto? And then accidentally he said that, I'm really excited to join ITC because, and then he tried to recover from it. But you should avoid those situations, because it is really not nice for for an interviewer to think to hear that, because they clearly get where your intentions are, right? And they also want to hire you. You should always remember that the companies are out there to hire you. They're not out there to reject you. They spent a lot of time and resources to hire you, right? So they are with you on that, as long as you show some interest, in joining them as well. So do this research, add some credibility. Also, another thing that I was made aware, in at least in the hardware space, was that certain companies come up with different profiles. So let's say Nvidia comes to hire, they have separate roles for physical design, for architecture, for RTL design. So it'll be nice to know those things and come up and be ready with an answer. So let's say you make it to Nvidia, and Nvidia says, okay, what kind of work do you want to do at Nvidia? And if you have a specific preference, then say it then, because they will bin different candidates based on that. That's what they do. And it could be same with for any other software company or for any other company as well. So what would also be nice is to know what kind of profiles come in for a particular company, and be ready with an answer if you're asked that what kind of job profile you prefer. So yeah, make sure you pay attention to those points. Thank you.
All right. So I've got another point to add here. So when you do research about company, right? So you have got one question to ask the interviewer at the end of the interview. So you might have noticed that usually the interviewers ask, okay, do you have something to ask to me, right? So there you can pitch in your questions. So it leaves a good impression, right? All right. So moving on next, we talked about strengths and weaknesses, right? But here's the question: how do we demonstrate our skills, right? So, for example, if you want to demonstrate a strengths to someone, how do we do that, right? So, I have this question for Vikash.
Yeah, it is very important question. Basically, interviewer is looking for your strengths. So what are your strengths, and that actually defines you as a person. And most of us has some kind of weaknesses as well. But if we show those weaknesses, upfront, those gives negative impression. Always, when you want to demonstrate your strength, we shall give a scenario. We shall follow a star approach. So what star approach says is, we put a scenario, we put a situation that, let's suppose you were working for a project, right? You can just give an example that we were working on a project, we missed our deadlines, and then uh, we had one of our project member, uh, some kind of emergency. Now this is the situation at hand. Second is task. What is the task lying there? So let's suppose this was the situation that one guy got emergency, and we missed old deadlines. Now we have a new deadline and we have less number of people. So task at hand was to complete our project within those timelines with less resources. Then third comes action. What kind of actions you took? And fourth is result. So star approach is basically situation, task, action, and result. So you put a scenario that we were working on a project and this was the situation, this was the task at our hand, and these are the actions which we took. And after taking those actions, this was the result. What should be the result? Result should be the project completion on the timeline. So we shall always approach this kind of process to demonstrate your strength. So there was a weakness in the starting. You mentioned that we missed the initial deadlines, but how you converted it and proved your strength to ensure that project is completed within the timelines. So I would say that whenever we are demonstrating our strengths, we shall follow this approach to answer this particular question. It always give confidence to the interviewer that, yeah, this guy has that ability to turn the table in the favor. Yeah. Over to
All
you.
right. Okay. Thank you. So we have one more question for Abhay. So the
Mhm.
question is, all interviews do not follow the same template, right? So can you please explain this in terms of how the same question can have different responses in different kinds of interviews? Over to you.
Okay, so I think it's first of all, it's kind of you have to see the intention why some question is being asked. I mean, be it your strength, be it your skill, be it your interest in the firm, uh, be it your marks. So you have to see the context and then you have to answer it. You don't have to answer it in the same manner if the question is changed, because their sequence will also matter, because some question could be following question or make or asking for some kind of clarification, versus some question would be a kind of opening statement. So I think just follow the lead, that why this question is coming now and in what context.
All right. So basically, you're trying to say that the response depends upon the interviewer's mindset as well, right?
Yeah, you can't enter into his mind and understand his mindset, but you can definitely understand the way he's asking, the tone he's asking, the kind of sequence he's approaching the question. So that would be important. Maybe he's convinced already of something about you and he doesn't want to go into that area, and he's first
Right.
going into some other area.
Right. Okay. All right. So moving on next. One question for all the panels. It's the same question, and I would request a short answer, one line answer. So let's say if you were to interview someone, what is the what is that particular quality that you'll always look for in the candidate? So I'll start off with Kinsho. What do you have to say?
Yeah, something similar to that I already mentioned. I always look for grit in a candidate. I want them to come up with the right answer. That's my intention. And I'm always out there to help them, mostly in the context of technical questions. But I want to see them trying. If they don't try,
Right.
then that doesn't give me confidence.
All right. Same question for Vikash.
Yeah, for me, I would look for the positive attitude of the candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the companies give trainings for skills and other things. So if you have basic knowledge and you have that positive attitude, you are fit for the organization. So I will always look for that positive and I can do it attitude in the interview.
All right. Over to you, Abhay. Same.
Yeah, so I think I will kind of somewhat repeat, of course, behavioral and attitudinal integrity in terms of how you are presenting yourself, how you are coming across, whether you are a learning man or you are done already and you have a fixed mindset. And second thing is what Kinshuk said is that it's not important that whether you are getting the right answer or not, but if you are approaching it right and your effort is right, then you are the guy.
All right. Moving on next, we have a placement interview preparation strategy. All right. So I'll be taking this section. So first of all, we all know that December 1st is the day one, right? That's when the interview starts in mostly almost all the colleges, right? So here's a sample strategy. Obviously, it can vary for different students. They can slightly tweak it out and see what works out best for me, right? So here's what I did, and I would recommend to my juniors, right? So I'll start off with the weekly and bi-weekly schedule. So right, so now we have almost 3 weeks, right? So mostly you'll have to target next 2 weeks, because the third week from now, which is basically the last week, is only for revision, right? So you have to have your schedule. You have to have your schedule to cover almost everything except the test that company offers. So basically you have to go through and cover all your resumes, all your projects, right? All your revision notes, all your theoretical subjects. So you have 2 weeks to prepare them, and the last week to revise, basically. So I would recommend you to have quick revision notes. Here's what I did. I had a piece of paper and I have written down all the headlines with the topic names. And whenever I wish to revise, I just look at the headlines and think of the answers in my own mind, right? So the next is, we have this time to document all the previous work, be it internships, projects, or any work related to PORs. So we do not want to leave anything for the last week, because remember, it's a week for the revision. So whatever work you have done, be it your projects. So you have to maintain a doc, and in that doc, basically you have to put in everything that you want to highlight in your interview, right? So that will basically have everything like Vikash sir mentioned about the star approach. So you have to frame all these questions in the form of a story, right? And that story should answer all these questions which I mentioned in this point number 4. It should be able to answer what was the work you did, why did you do that work, and how did you do that work. Other methods, yeah, this one is very important. So for example, let's say if you are solving a problem using linear regression, if you are in data, right? So you should also have a question around why did you take linear regression and why not logistic regression, right? Because interviewer can ask you this question, so you have to basically get ready to answer these kind of questions, right? And then you'll have benefits. So what were the benefits of you using that particular method, and like the outcomes, obviously, right? And then you have also to document all the common interview questions, and that could be HR related or maybe technical related if you are in a technical field, or maybe some question related to design. And I think there are a lot of resources online where you can get common questions, and I'll also share a link later where you can find some common questions, right? Yeah, moving on. Next, prepare your hobby. And I think this is very important because usually what happens is students keep on preparing for the companies for their tests for last 4 to 5 months, and during that time they usually do not get time for their hobbies, right? So when it comes to the interview, there are high chances that interviewer may ask you, okay, tell me what is your hobby, and then maybe if you have something to say, then the follow-up questions are very, very dangerous, right? So you have to basically have all these things ready, that what is your hobby and why do you like that. And another two questions important that I found important is what was the first impression, or when did you start liking it, and what was your latest or the most recent interaction. So an example I could give here is let's say if someone's hobby is to read articles, technical articles, right? So then the interviewer can ask you, okay, what was the last article you read? So these kind of questions you have to be prepared for, right? So moving on. Next, company wise feedback in Channel I. So I assume that you'll all start getting your shortlist by second week of November. So that's when you'll kind of have an idea about which companies are you going to sit for interviews, right? So that's where this point is going to come into play. So you have a lot of companies feedback. So for example, when I got offers from Amazon and Oracle, like in my college, I filled out this form wherein I talked about what kind of questions they asked and what was the HR round like. So you can find all these details in the Channel I portal of IIT Roorkee, right? And then you have also got to prepare company-wise interview questions. Uh, and these could be anything related to your resume or maybe your job profile, or depending upon the type of company questions the company usually asked in the past. And you know where to find it, the Bible of software development, which is GFG, right? And then next, yeah, this is also very important. Connect to the seniors, right? As Kinshuk mentioned, you have to connect to the seniors or maybe your friends working in that domain. And how do you connect it? And there are a couple of ways. Obviously, you can contact your immediate seniors, your mentors, your LinkedIn connections, or maybe Channel I database. And I think it's pretty easy to find, right? So once you have all these things, you have to do mock interviews, and I would recommend at least 2 mock interviews every week, right? And I cannot emphasize this is very important because that's where you actually know what your problem is during interviews, right? And not only giving mock interviews, you have to record and analyze your movements, right? I'll talk about it in the next slide, right? So mock interviews are very important. All right. So moving on. Yeah. So the first point basically tells what kind of interviews you can expect, and the same applies for the mock interviews that you ask your friends or seniors for. It could be technical, HR, coding, case, system design, or topic specific. If you feel like that you are not performing well in a particular topic, you can request a mock interviews in that particular topic, right? And the resume based interview is obviously very important. Okay. So how you wanna analyze your interview is basically what the second point says. You have to analyze your behavior, how you are speaking. Are you starting your sentences with a negative word, or are you moving too much while speaking? So this basically shows your body movements, and how are you reacting to unexpected questions, which the interviewer may ask out of the blue. and it may not be related to your resume or maybe not related to your profile. So you get be prepared for all these things. See, another thing that we have here is talking typing speed. You do not have to talk too fast so that the interview don't understand, because whatever he hears from you, it's most likely he's hearing for maybe for the first time, because he has to interview 50 people in one day, right? So you have to maintain your speed, you have to maintain your pitch. You do not have to be too fast sometimes or maybe too slow sometimes. Maintain your speed. So the next thing is typing speed. So this is something that I found very important for software profile students, right? So you do not want to look into the keyboard for every word you type, because there are a lot of people being interviewed, right? So let's say if we have a student who is looking at the keyboard every time he types, and on the other hand there is a student who's not looking at the keyboard very frequently, right? So obviously my bias would go towards the second student, because that kinds of give me an impression that okay, he has been typing for a long time, so if other qualities are same, he would be a better experienced person in terms of uh, programming, right? And then the explanations, like as Vikash mentioned, we have to follow a star approach, which you have to implement basically in all the answers that you draft, right? So the next thing we have, don't bore the interviewer, because he has been sitting for the whole day. He has been interviewing a lot of people, right? So you do not want to just keep on saying, or maybe you just don't want him to sit idle for a very long time. So this is where the point, you have to ask him questions in the middle, if possible, right? You do not have to overshoot. So this will keep him involved, right? Another thing we have here is keep reports, source code if you are a developer, design portfolios if you are a designer in handy. In most of the cases, they may ask you for your past work, so you have to keep all these things in handy, right? All right, moving on next, greet the interviewer, right? So I have seen a lot of cases where students just come and sit like a statue, right? They do not have anything to say, and they just reply whatever they are asked. So which is not a good idea. So I would suggest you ask questions like, okay, how are you doing? How was your day? So these kind of makes more interactive interactions, right? Okay, so the next one is fight imposter syndrome. I have given a link to this, and this is very, very important. We mentioned earlier in this session. So please go through this video, and it will really help you a lot, right? Okay, so next we have a couple of interview preparation material. I have provided the link. So this link will basically provide you some articles or maybe some YouTube playlists, which will tell you how you can actually prepare better for your interviews, right? Okay, so next we have eyes speak it all, no notes on the wall, right? So a lot of students usually think that they'll have paper on the laptop screen, and if they mess out something, they can look into it quickly. But this is not a good idea at all, because people can easily catch you if you do these kind of things, right? So be aware and stay away from all these things. So new IDs, yeah, so this is also one unexpected things, one of the unexpected things that may happen. So you might be programming in, let's say, one of the ID, let's say VS code, but it's up to the interviewer. He can give you another IDE to code on, and that might seem new to you. So you have to be ready for it, right? In some of the cases, I've seen a lot of people ask you to code on Google Doc, right? Which is very hard, because first of all, it doesn't follow any coding patterns, like it doesn't auto format things. And the second thing is, it doesn't have any numbering. So let's say if you are explaining to him something, right? So it's very hard to say, okay, look into this particular line, because that's not possible beforehand. So for this, I'd recommend you to have a Google Doc extension, which basically numbers each and every line of the Google Doc. So this will help you a lot, right? Okay, so yeah, here's one last thing. So at the towards the end of the interview, you may expect a question from the interviewer saying, "Okay, do you have anything to ask me?" So you have that opportunity to ask something, and I think that's very important. So that's where company homework will help you a lot. And if you do not feel like you have anything, you can obviously ask for the feedback, right? And yeah, this is all obviously a good uh, good way to ask at least something, right? And maybe after the interview, I would suggest you to connect him on the LinkedIn, which basically I think if he doesn't have anything to say feedback during the interview, you can ask him later, maybe after a couple of days, right? So here's a quote that I really like a lot. It's where the confidence or let anxiety to you. So I'll request you guys to think over it, and I think that will also help you a lot, right? So here are a couple of things that I would have you guys to keep in mind. So I request you all to take the screenshot because there's no need to go into detail into all of these things, right? So I'll wait a couple of seconds and then we'll move on. Okay. So after this, we'll open up for questions. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comment section of the YouTube. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible, right? Okay, and after this session, if you still have any questions, you can reach out to any of us, sir, and any of us on LinkedIn or via email. I'll provide these details, or maybe I'll get this slide shared to all of you who have registered for the session, right? So now we are open for the questions, right? Okay. Let me go through the questions and I'll ask one by one. All right. So here we have one question. I see. Okay. So the question says, how do a student cope up with the fear of interview? If someone is not fluent in English, what should be done in this case, right? So Kinshuk, do you want to take this question?
Yes. Thank you for asking the question. I think one one thing that always helps is to realize that you're not the only person who's nervous. I was nervous when I gave my first interview. I was nervous when I gave my 10th interview, and I will be nervous when I give my next interview, even after I've interviewed at least 50 to 100 candidates now. So you know it, everyone else is nervous, and the interviewer expects it and knows it too. So that's all right. And the second thing that will always help you in calming down is to realize that the interviewer is out there to hire you. So when I interview someone to recruit them for Apple, I spend at least half an hour going through their resume, preparing questions to ask to them. Then I spend 1 hour talking to them, and then I spend another 15 minutes writing their feedback. So I just spent about 2 hours in a candidate. I don't want to waste those 2 hours, right? I want the candidate to succeed so that I don't have to spend another 2 hours on any other candidate. So the intention of an interviewer is always to hire you, as long as you can demonstrate certain skills and as long as you can give them the confidence that you'll be a right candidate. So keep these two things in mind. It's perfectly normal to be nervous. Also, it's perfectly normal to assume that the interviewer has come to the interview with a positive mindset. And then the other part was about talking in English. That's all right as well, because not everyone may have a background where it gives them access to enough people speaking English around them, and they may not have like fluent English. That's all right, because let's say if Nvidia comes to hire you, they're looking for your VLSI skills. They're looking for how much technical ability do you have, and that's the first and foremost skill that they're looking for. Speaking in English is a byproduct, right? You can learn it. It's not super hard to learn, and you can always learn it when you're provided a right environment. So keep that in mind, and as I mentioned earlier, right, like if you identify a skill which you don't have, practice it. Practice is as much time as you can. So if you think you're not fluent, practice it. Listen to English audio, listen to songs, talk to your friends in English, and that will always help you in preparing better.
All right. Yeah. Adding on to this, mock interviews always still help you a lot, right? Mostly the analysis part where you can actually see what part you are lacking at, right? So that's where you actually get to know what area you need to work on more. So have mock interviews, record and analyze it, right? All right, moving on next. So we have another question. So a student is asking, he doesn't have a good software resume, right? So, but he's applying for software companies. He has got a couple of shortlists in software. So what would be the best approach for him to go through that, right? So maybe Vikash, if you want to take this question.
Yeah. So regarding software, Pratham, I would like Kinshuk to answer because now for around 8 years I am out of software
All right.
completely. I'm into sales.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
it
got
would
it.
be good if Kensuk answer on this question. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So I think it's all right. I mean, obviously, you have to identify that in this case, you may not be the most fit candidates um, for the company. But because they've shortlisted you, that obviously means that they like something about your profile, right? So they will try to cater your interview in that direction. And especially in the context of software, right? A big part of software writing is about algorithms, about your analytical thinking, about your problem solving, how you can optimize a given problem through your analytical thinking, right? So maybe you're able to demonstrate that okay, if you ask me a puzzle or if you ask me a question, or let's say if you give me an array of number and ask me to sort it, I can sort it in three different ways and I can identify, okay, this is more efficient, this is less efficient. So you can demonstrate that ability in different ways. Also, you still have 3 weeks, so if you can always be a better programmer in 3 weeks than what you are now. So again, if you really want to get in those companies, dedicate time to practicing.
All right. We have another question which says 6 CGPA versus 7 CGPA versus 8 CGPA. So would you like
I
to
would,
take? Yeah.
yeah, I would like to take this answer, Pratham.
Yep.
So I would like to say that CGPA matters a bit, but not completely. So I have seen people getting 6 CGPA doing far better in their career as compared to person who has got 9 CGPA. Right. So it is your attitude towards work. It is your own behavioral skill which drives you in your organization, right? Obviously you shall always have your CGPA above cutoff, so most of the companies are having their cutoffs, right, for the CGPA. So always target that you have your CGPA above cutoff, and you show your real skills, your real strengths during the interview. So I would like to hire a person having more positive attitude, having better technical skills, and if he has less CGPA, it will not matter to me. If a person who is having higher CGPA but he is not able to show his positive sides, right, if he is having some kind of ego problem, sometimes they show that I am having 9 CGPA, I know it all, right? So that kind of negative, if you show that attitude, I know it all, it gives negative impression to the interviewer. So I would say that CGPA, keep it above cutoff and show your strengths during the interview, work on your strengths, that will always help.
All right. Thank you. We have another question which says, if we do not know any answer to the question that is asked by the interviewer, how should I react? So maybe Abhay, you want to take this question?
I think it's a very good question, and the best thing is to say that sorry, I don't know, but if you allow me, I can attempt. And if he allows you, you can attempt, and you may go wrong. Also, it doesn't matter. But I think you have shown your humility that you don't know the answer and you're going to try it out, and try it out the way Kinshuk said that your approach should be right.
Right. Yep. Yeah, I think it's better to have a discussion on this. Take a setback and think about it and answer it. Right.
Yeah.
All right. We have another question which says, how do I greet the interviewer when I enter the room? What would be the dressing? And how to end an interview? What would be the final greetings? Right. So let me have this question. So what I would suggest here is, when you enter the room or maybe when you join the meeting, it's very good to ask. Say it's very good to say, okay, hello, how are you doing, or maybe good evening, how was your day, because you know that interviewer have been interviewing a lot of people, he must be tired, right? So you should show some empathy, right? Saying that, okay, how was your day, and then he'll answer something, and if possible you can follow up on that answer itself. So let's say if he says, okay, it's been a long day, then you can talk about, uh, I see, it must be tiring, you have been interviewing, so something kind of this. It's very, generic. You cannot hard code it from the start, but you should at least um, try to involve with the discussion with the interviewer, right? So that's is a plus point, I would say, because the more you interact, I think the more interviewer becomes biased towards you, because the more you interact, the more he knows more about you, right? So that's where you pitch in more things.
At the
Talking
same time, we should not stretch this ice breaking or polite conversation too much,
right. Mhm.
because and second thing is that you should be aware about. It could be cricket, it could be any political development, that in ice breaking session he could ask you anything.
Right.
So you should not come out as an unaware person of what is happening around in the world.
Yep. Yeah. That's a good point, actually. So let's say if you are sitting for a technical interview, then he may ask you, I mean, he may discuss some latest technical advancements that's happening, right? So, for example, if Kinshuk is taking an interview, he might ask you, okay, have you heard anything from Apple recently? What is Apple doing in its space? What is Apple innovating recently, right? So, maybe these kind of things. And I think company wise homework will help you answer all these questions as well, right? Okay, so now we have dressing sense. I would recommend you to wear formals even if it's online, because you never know. Anything can happen. Maybe a pen falls down from your table and you have to stand up to pick it up, right? So dress as wisely as you can, right? And the closing note, yes, obviously, like we mentioned, it's always good to ask for the feedback if anything. You do not have anything to ask, but most probably you should be able to ask him questions related to his company, right? Or maybe you can ask some questions like, okay, what do you think as a fresher are the qualities required to excel in this field, right? So I think this is very important, and I used to ask this question a lot when I was giving interviews. uh, all right, so moving on, next questions. How to reduce nervousness, or at least hide nervousness from the interviewer during the interview round? Okay, so anyone want to take up this question? I think we have answered mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say don't don't try to reduce nervousness or don't try to hide it. Just
Right.
try to develop a human connection, right? I always tell my candidates when I sense that they are being nervous, I try to calm them down as well, and I just say just think of it as a technical discussion with your peer, and that's what interviews for the most part are. They are technical discussions where one person is just trying to get an assessment of the other person, right? What they know and what they don't. So don't put an active effort on trying to hide your nervousness. It's all right. With time you will ease into the interview anyway, because you'll be asked things that you know, that you're comfortable with, so you will get comfortable eventually.
And the moment you are in situation, the nervousness goes down considerably, because now you are in flow and action.
Right.
And take a deep breath. So just think that it's temporary. And
All right. So we have one more important question here. What if the interviewer asks if you want to go for higher studies? This is a very diplomatic question, and what do you think would be the best answer for this? So, Kinshuk, why do you not take this question?
I would I mean, it's a diplomatic answer, but I think it is also true is that, at least in my case, I've realized that if I want to do technical work, a much better place to learn that technical work is in industry versus studying in school. In school, we are taught about technologies which are a decade old or maybe even more, right? In Roorkee, I learned about a processor which Intel designed in 1980s, and I graduated in 2013, right? So it was obviously not relevant to the industry. So if I want to develop latest products in hardware space, the best place to learn is industry. So I would say answer it that way, that, hey, I imagine myself working in, let's say, investment banking for the next 5 to 10 years at least, and I believe that the best place to learn it is in the industry. So I don't think another postgraduate degree will add value to my profile, and that is why I don't want to go for it, right? That is how I would answer this question.
which is true also. I mean, just because you are postgraduate, you don't get any extra, kick in your profession. Your experience and your position sincerity counts more. But if at all you want to give a kind of this thing, that as of now, I don't have any plans. I want to stick to learning and growth, then higher education.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and one more point I would say, you can say something like, if there is a business requirement from the company, I would consider going for higher studies. Right. All right. So we have one question here. The question is, tell me about yourself. So when we frame this question, it's not necessary to show all your technical skills, right? So do you have any ratio defined in this? So how much you should focus on your skills and other achievements? So if anyone want to take this question.
So I would like to say on the skills part, it's not necessary to mention all the skills.
Right.
Mention only the relevant skills, and you are good at it, right? So let's suppose I know I have worked on 4 5 programming languages, but I know that I am good at this particular language. So better mention that particular language first and mention only 2 3 language which are actually relevant to the your job profile. So instead of mentioning all the skills, mention which is more relevant to the profile and which you are good at.
Mhm.
So that will be the better way while you are answering this particular question.
All right. Next, we have one question which says it is not always possible to disclose the project because of some patents or some company policies. So, how do a student approach in this case? So, anyone want to take this question?
I think, see, we also have this issue that you don't want to discuss your projects or your clients, etc.
Right.
And it's all right to discuss in third person, in third language, and saying that I cannot discuss, unfortunately. So they will, in fact, like it because they know that their secrets are also safe in your hands, and you are not a loud mouth or loose mouth.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So we are almost up time. We'll take one or two more questions. So we have another question here, which says, can we use our personal incidents or personal life as an example to show our strengths, like motivation or stress management, if asked by the interviewer? So anyone who would like to take this question?
Absolutely. I think it just adds, it just makes your story more genuine.
Right.
It's very easy for the interviewer to build confidence in you if you give them real life examples or data. So, in terms of technical questions, data and results, in terms of real life situation or behavioral question, it has to be a real life example where they can connect a certain skill set to certain life situation where you applied the skill set and actually got something out of it.
All right, so we'll take one final question, which says, I could not complete my project because of COVID. How do I move ahead explaining this situation? Right, so, anyone?
I didn't
So
don't focus on sympathy and just focus on way forward in terms of I could not do, but I will finish it, and it will have no bearing on my working with you.
Mhm.
So
so always show growth perspective, not
yeah,
not on the don't look always forward, not the backside.
Right,
So what has happened has happened. So show the way that I will be doing this now and how I will be doing it
right.
instead of showing that what went wrong. Yeah.
Mhm. All right, so I think we have taken enough questions. I'm sure there are a lot of other questions, but feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn or email IDs if you have more questions. I wish you all the best for your interviews and placement session overall. And thank you very much, all the panelists, for your time. It was a great session, and you have been great audience, everyone. Thank you very much, and bye. Good night.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you everyone
Thanks,
for
everybody.
joining.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
All the best.
Best wishes.
Best wishes for placement session. Thank you.